So, have you ever felt that kind of sticky, nagging feeling, from a past mistake, maybe something you should let go of, but well, you just can't seem to shake it. That heavy feeling from a situation, maybe a really difficult one, that just feels, I don't know, impossible to escape. Well, today on the deep dive, we're really going to unpack that universal struggle, isn't it?
Hmm.
Self-forgiveness.
Mm.
We're diving into some fascinating new research. It's from Flinders University, and it explores exactly why some of us get trapped in those feelings, guilt, shame, while others somehow they find a way forward. This study, it was just published in the journal Self and Identity. SciTech Daily reported on it, and it goes way beyond just saying, "Oh, just let it go."
Mhm.
So, our mission today is to really understand the complexities here. What did this research actually uncover? And maybe find some surprising insights into how people can move from that self condemnation place to something like peace.
Yeah. And what's really compelling, I think, is that it helps us understand not just what self-forgiveness looks like, but why. Why are these emotional, these psychological processes just so incredibly challenging sometimes? And maybe how that understanding gives us a different way to think about it for ourselves, too.
Okay, so let's get into this puzzle then. The Flinders University researchers, they basically set out to figure out why self-forgiveness feels almost impossible for some people, but, well, attainable for others. They looked at the real life experiences of about 80 participants, specifically comparing those who eventually did manage to forgive themselves with those who just felt like they couldn't, like it was utterly impossible. And what they found in the group that struggled, it was genuinely quite stark.
Yeah, it really was. Many of them talked about reliving the situation
Yeah.
over and over again, feeling completely, utterly unable to move forward and wrestling with these really powerful persistent emotions, things like guilt, regret, shame, intense self-blame. This wasn't just a passing feeling. It was like an ongoing internal battle, almost like being stuck in a loop.
Yeah, that loop idea, that persistent internal battle where the event feels so vivid, so immediate, maybe even years later. It really highlights what Professor Lydia Woodyatt, she's the lead author, professor in psychology, what she emphasizes, which is that self-forgiveness is just way more complex than simply moving on or, forgetting what happened.
Right. Because, interestingly, the people who did manage to forgive themselves,
Hmm.
they still thought about the event sometimes. And yeah, sometimes they still felt shame or guilt, especially if something specific reminded them of it.
Ah, okay. So it wasn't like the feelings just vanished completely. Right.
No, not at all. But here's the crucial difference the research found. For those who achieved self-forgiveness, those emotions, they were significantly less intense and much less frequent. The key thing was the event no longer controlled their lives.
Okay, that makes sense. Less control.
Exactly. And they also talked about making a conscious effort,
Yeah.
focusing on the future, accepting their limitations, maybe limitations in knowledge or judgment or control they had back then, and importantly, actively reconnecting with their own values as they move forward. It's like a shift in the power dynamic, really. They regain control over their emotional landscape.
Right. Regaining control. Now, here's a finding that, honestly, it really made me pause for a second. The research showed that people who felt they'd failed someone they cared about, like, say, a child, a partner, a friend, or, and this is the bit, even people who had been victims themselves, they often found it the hardest to move on. Which kind of challenges that common idea, doesn't it? That self-forgiveness is only for people who clearly did something wrong.
Hmm.
So, I mean, why? Why would shame and guilt pop up even when you're the victim or when you felt like you had no control?
That's a really profound question, isn't it? And Professor Woodyatt offers this compelling idea, those emotions, they're a clue. She explains that feelings like shame and guilt often point towards something deeper, a deeper wound she calls moral injury.
Moral injury. Okay.
Yeah. Essentially, it's the psychological distress that happens when your deeply held moral beliefs get violated. And that could be by your own actions, sure, but also by what others do, or even just by circumstances totally beyond your control. These emotions, he suggests, are kind of our brain's way of trying to process threats to our core psychological needs.
Our core psychological needs are, okay, like what? What kind of needs are we talking about?
Well, the study really points to two big ones. First, our need for agency,
Agency, meaning.
our sense of choice, control, autonomy. Think about feeling stuck and powerless when you really wanted to act differently. Or that sting of regretting a decision you made. That hits our sense of agency.
Okay, got it. Agency. And the second one.
The second is our need for belonging. This is about being, an appropriate group member or a good relationship partner, living according to shared values. Think about that internal ache when you feel like you've let down someone you really care about. jeopardizing your place with them maybe, that threatens our need for belonging.
Okay. Agency and belonging.
Exactly. And when those core needs feel threatened, that's when these really intense feelings of shame and guilt can dig in and take root.
Wow. That that puts a whole different frame on it. So instead of being like, I don't know, a simple switch you just flip, the study found self-forgiveness isn't a one-time decision you just make. It's more like a complex process.
Precisely. A process of repairing these deeper moral
Okay.
injuries. It takes time. It takes reflection. Often it takes support from other people too.
So it's a profound shift in how we understand it then. It's not about trying to erase the
No,
past.
not at all. It's about navigating the emotional fallout,
Yeah.
but in a way that lets you actually heal those core psychological wounds we just talked about, agency and belonging.
Right. Okay, so let's try and bring these threads together then. What this deep dive really reveals, quite powerfully, I think, is that self-forgiveness. It's definitely not that simple switch you flip one morning. It's much more like a complex, maybe even ongoing process. And Professor Woodyatt's insight really sums it up, doesn't it? It's not about forgetting what happened. It's not about never feeling guilt again. It's more about consciously working to reduce the intensity, reduce the frequency of those emotions, so the event basically stops controlling your life.
Exactly. And if we connect that to the bigger picture, this study fundamentally shifts how we might think about guilt and shame. They aren't just, bad emotions we need to squash or avoid. They're actually vital clues, clues pointing to that deeper moral injuries,
Hmm.
specifically where it connects to threats against our core needs, our agency, our belonging.
So they highlight where our sense of self or our place in the world or our ability to act effectively, where it's been wounded.
Precisely. And understanding self-forgiveness is this process of moral repair, reaffirming your agency, reaffirming your moral identity that offers a completely different pathway forward. More constructive one, maybe.
And it sounds like this isn't just relevant for us as individuals trying to find personal peace. Dr. Melissa DeVel Palumbo, who's a criminologist and psychologist also involved in the study, she points out how these insights are valuable for mental health professionals, people working directly with guilt and shame.
Absolutely. And even, as she mentioned, potentially for criminologists, because understanding how people process guilt and responsibility, well, those are key factors in understanding things like offending behavior and also rehabilitation. It touches a lot of areas.
It really does.
Which brings us maybe to a final thought, something for you, the listener, to consider. If our emotions, shame, guilt, if they really are clues to moral injury, clues related to our sense of agency and belonging, well, how might reflecting on those moments when you feel stuck, how might that help you identify which of these core needs might be feeling threatened for you? Is it more about feeling powerless, that loss of agency, or is it more about feeling like you've damaged a connection, threatened your belonging? Just maybe. Recognizing which one is at play could empower you to approach your own internal struggles, maybe even understand others' struggles better, with a renewed sense of understanding, perhaps, and maybe a clearer path towards that moral repair. Something to think about.